So, I have chosen this very beautiful backdrop for a very interesting conversation today, or at least a conversation I hope you find interesting, and that is on American paganism. And what I mean by this is the spiritual movements that are happening in America right now and how those are also connected to the spiritual movements of the past and the beliefs of the people who used to call America home. I'm 30 years old, and around 7 or 8 years ago, I started getting into spirituality and paganism. And my entrance into this was Norse paganism, the Norse gods. And for a very long time, that's what this channel talked about, was the Norse gods. And while I still talk about them fairly often, they're still a part of my practice today, everything changed when I went to Scandinavia, because I immediately didn't recognize it as my home. And I think what I really want to kind of hammer in here is your version of paganism is going to be influenced by many different factors. And one of those major factors is the land that you're on. America is a very interesting case because so many of us come from varying degrees and backgrounds and ethnicities and reasons that we came to the United States, both good and bad. And I think a lot of our problems come from our disconnection to our ancestry, because we all have ancestors, no matter who you are. And a lot of the people who came to America from Europe were doing it to escape Europe, doing it to escape their cultures there. And so many people even changed their name, like my family. When my family immigrated, more than likely from Scotland, they changed their last name. And so whatever clan we were a part of, they cast aside. And for generations, no one thought of our Scottish heritage again. And it really wasn't until me and traveling to Scotland and feeling that connection there that I really started digging into that and wanted to connect more to my Scottish heritage. But then I'm still here in this land, or at least I come back here very often. And the nonprofit that I helped started here in this land. And from the very beginning, we had to start acknowledging the native spirits, the native traditions that existed here. And that's a very, again, difficult conversation because we definitely don't want to go into that side of cultural appropriation. But we must acknowledge this land, acknowledge its history, much like the people in the UK today. Thousands and millions of people flock to Stonehenge, particularly for its spiritual reasons. And people go all across the UK for all these ancient sites, these stone circles, to honor them, acknowledge them, and leave gifts there. But the truth is, the builders of these ancient monuments, the builders of most of the burial mounds, the stone circles, the cairns, the hinges, those are from thousands of years ago and so far removed from the people of the UK today. Much like the ancient sites here in the mountains, many of the sacred ancient sites to the natives of North America, such as Serpent Mound, were built by tribes that the Europeans never even came in contact with. They were gone by the time we got there. Much like Cahokia, a place I visited earlier this year. Cahokia, this massive system of mounds and pyramid-like structures, those people were gone. It is difficult because, yes, the Europeans came, murdered, killed, and pushed out the native people. And they weren't thinking about honoring the land, very clearly. I don't know if many people were thinking about honoring the land back then. But now we're thinking about it again. And based on my conversations with indigenous teachers and healers that I've met in my journeys, even outside of North America, that's what is most important, is no matter the color of your skin, that we're returning to honoring the land. And this is in ways that we know they were honored in the past through the indigenous healers and teachers. And so I believe it's very difficult because I know there's people probably already, angry at me saying these things. And that's one of the reasons it's been difficult to talk about. And one of the reasons I think many people go to Norse paganism, to Celtic paganism, to Wicca, is because it kind of avoids and circumnavigates the complexities of honoring the land in an indigenous way. Being an American is very complicated. We're one of the most unique countries in the world, a country of immigrants, a country of the conquered. But like I said, if you go back far enough into history of places like the UK, you see this too. It's a story of invasions, a story of immigrations, of cultures being pushed aside to make way for new ones. And then those layers of history are built on top of it. Norse paganism, Celtic paganism, I don't know how much they can actually exist here in the United States because we live on this land. I think we're American pagans. I think that fits this new wave of interest into spirituality, into the past. And to be an American pagan is both acknowledging the indigenous practices of the land, but also acknowledging the complexity of our ancestry that makes up all of us. There's hardly an American that is one of anything. You know, we're all a bit of German, a bit of Irish, African, different tribes of Africa. Some of us are indigenous and have a little bit of indigenous in us. And it can make our ancestral connection very difficult, especially when so much wrong was done to this land and its people. But I think the answer can't be to avoid it. We must acknowledge the land and its presence and its spirits once more. Just thinking about a ceremony I just did up here with my friends as we climbed this mountain here in Colorado. We did a practice with hape. We used a bell of an eagle. We saw sparrows flying up here. I'm wearing a poncho from South America. But then I reflected on Odin while I was up here. Odin in the spear dancer culture. I say words in my ceremonies in Cherokee and Scots Gaelic and Scandinavian and Old Norse. And the reason that my practice is blended is because I'm blended. I'm from this land. Well, not this one specifically, but the American land. My ancestry is very complicated, like many people here. And the gods I worship are from Scandinavia. Being an American is very strange. And ultimately, I should say, I don't like labels. I think labels are kind of silly. I think we're overly obsessed with labels. But I think many people are waking up to spirituality now. And labels help them find answers. And that's why I think many people go to Norse paganism or Celtic paganism, is because it's something to focus on. And there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. It's how I got into this. But being in America, being an American pagan, I think it's very important that we honor the spirits here. And in a respectful way. Because this land is beautiful. The people that honored this land before us were beautiful in their traditions. And so we must do what we can to honor and respect what they believed in, just as we can try to do what we can to honor and respect their beliefs. So I think what I'll leave you with here at the end of this video, to make it useful and not just me rambling, is what is American paganism? I think it's defined by three things. The land that we're on. This land used to be part of the indigenous peoples of North America. And the practices and traditions here are disappearing. And the way to acknowledge this land is through those practices and through those people and their medicines and traditions. But we must do that in a respectful way and acknowledge the land that we're on. I think it's then defined also by our ancestors. And our ancestors is not something we can necessarily choose. We can choose our family, of course, now, but our ancestry is what made us and what got us here. Our ancestry is complicated, no matter who you are as an American. And we must both acknowledge the good and the bad of our ancestral lineages, but also learn how much healing can be done by going into those ancestral lines. I think no matter what kind of American you are, whether it's someone who just immigrated here, someone whose family's been here for 200 years and came over in Ellis Island, or whose families have been here for thousands of years, healing that connection to our ancestors is so important, and we need to acknowledge them. And then finally, the gods that you choose to worship and that choose to see this world in. And this is where, again, if you're saying, oh, I want to worship Odin, I want to worship Loki, Thor, Bridget, the sky god, Earth Mother, these things, whatever works for you, whatever mythology inspires you. And this is where I'm saying, if you want to worship Odin with, whatever ethnicity, that's wonderful. And that's, when I went to Scandinavia, I didn't feel a connection ancestrally there, and I don't know if I have much ancestry to Scandinavia. But the gods in Scandinavian mythology have helped me so much, and have been a huge part of my journey. I still wear my Mjolnir with pride. It's under here. It's in here, I promise. I'm so grateful for the Norse gods and what they've taught me about my home in America, what they've taught me abroad as I wander, and what this land has taught me. And for people watching this from not America, it can be slightly different, but those three things just change. If you're from Scandinavia, you're on the lands of Scandinavia, worshiping the Scandinavian spirits and the land there. You have the ancestry of Scandinavia and honoring the ancestors there. And you might worship the Scandinavian gods. Those three things can shift and change depending on where you are and your lineage. Long ago in this in this channel, I used to say, is this not what religion should be? And I said it right over here in this ceremony I just did. This is my church. This is my temple. And this is what religion should be.